Knowledge is not power. What we do with our knowledge is power. It is very possible to work less, make more, have you and your team happier. A lot of times why patients either don't show or blow you off last minute is because we have not done a good enough job of building the value of that patient coming back.
We have someone that was with us the last quarter that I wanted to bring back. And we talked earlier about maybe bringing this in as a series on a quarterly basis. We have Dr. Geraldine Alfie, and she's not going to sing Alfie today, okay?
No. Let's not torture your followers.
But she will be giving you some very good pieces of information to start your new year off right. And I just had to bring her back. Join me in welcoming Dr. Alfie. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm great, Ward. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, wonderful. It's a brand spanking new year. A lot of people are revving things up. They have their New Year's resolutions going. They have their business plan in place. And for those that don't, here is some information. Even if you do already, you might want to integrate it into your plan. I mean, she has some things that she's going to share with us. I think you're going to use. So let's get started.
Okay.
So tell us where are we with production and what is your thought about that right now? How do you polish that, if you will?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Ward. One of the things that doctors will usually keep an eye on, and their team will as well, is how much production did I do today, this week, this month, quarter, year, etc. And like I always say, knowledge is not power. What we do with our knowledge is power. And so you want to take whatever your metrics are and then start to leverage them so that you can start to attain whatever goals you've set for yourself. So when Ward and I were talking earlier today, we thought it would be a good time to talk about goal setting for the year. It is the start of the year. And frankly, you're already a little bit behind the ball if you haven't started setting your goals. If you have not already set your goals, with my clients, we routinely meet for our annual planning sessions. I do an individual one with each client because each client is unique. And we get started in November. So I get through with everybody right before Christmas, and then I collapse for a week. And but if you don't set the year with intention, then before you know it, it's October, you're scrambling, and now you're trying to shove in a bunch of patients at the end of the year because they're trying to max out their insurance benefits, and you're trying to maximize your profitability, hopefully, which is very different from productivity. But if you don't know where you're going, how will you know when you got there?
Hmm.
So I wanted to talk a little bit, if it's okay with you, Ward, about goal setting. Because
Absolutely.
for any of you that haven't done it yet, do it now, okay? The best time to have done it was last year at the end of the year, but look at it this way. You now have all of your numbers from 2025. So you have a good base to figure out, where do I want to go within the next 12 months? So the way I do it with my offices is, first thing we want to determine is, how much growth does the doctor want to see in his or her practice over the next 12 months? So that's the first step. You have to set whatever growth percentage you want to see in your office. Most of my clients routinely, at a minimum, will have 10% growth year over year as their goal set. I say at a minimum because the only clients I have that are setting only about a 10% goal are the ones who are pretty much maxed out as to what they can be doing. They have their systems in place, their team are firing on all cylinders, they are minimizing open time, they are maximizing their efficiency and productivity, and they have shed all insurance participation. They are seeing only fee-for-service clients, or they are accepting benefits, but they are not in network with any of the insurance providers. And so they really have taken the time and done the work to create the practice that they wanted, because it takes work. So now that the year is done, so you have, write this down, the numbers that you want to use to set your goals for this coming year. What was your gross and your net production? What was your gross and your net collections. Figure out what your adjustment percentage was for both production and collections, new patients, and what was your overhead percentage. Those are the areas, those are the levers that we want to be pulling on to start to create massive growth in your practice and moving forward. Once you determine what that number is, and I have a few clients that year over year, they have been still setting 20% growth goals for themselves year over year, and they have been exceeding them. They have been doing multiple things throughout the course of the year, whether it's dropping participation, adding additional services, really maximizing the use of technology, outsourcing things that don't need to be handled by the people in the practice, that can be done by an outside company that specializes in some of those menial, mundane, annoying, yet necessary tasks. And that's how they are able to see that kind of growth. And I want to add also taking more vacation time. So it is very possible to work less, make more, have you and your team happier, and start doing the kind of dentistry and building the practice that you want, that makes people want to flock to you. So once you have determined what kind of growth do you want to see in the next 12 months, next thing you need to do is this, write this down. You want to calculate the total number of hours that your office is open to take care of patients throughout the course of the year. Now, the next thing you need to do is calculate how many hours each provider has available to take care of patients over the next 12 months. And that includes your doctors and your hygienists. The only other possible one is if you work in a state that has EFTA. A lot of EFTAs are able to generate their own production, so we would want to know that information as well. Now what we have to do is see if those things sync. Because if a doctor tells me, well, I want to see 30% growth year over year, and that means that she's going to have to produce, an additional, $600,000, let's say, next year. But she's also cutting back on how many hours she's there, and she's only got 2 part-time hygienists. Then that's where the rubber hits the road. And reality sometimes is a cold splash in the face. So now we need to make decisions. Do you want to lower your growth goal, which is a possibility? And when I work with my clients, I let them know. I want them to tell me what they want to see. And I've already done math before we meet. So I've run their numbers at 10%, 15, 20, 25% growth to see what I think is realistic, because it has to be a realistic goal. They can't all be big, hairy, audacious goals. Something that you want to see results on in 12 months needs to be a realistic goal. And then from what they tell me, I either say, great, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. Now let's go through the numbers so you can see how that will work. Or I say, hey, I actually ran the numbers and I think you can shoot higher. Or I say, I don't know what you were smoking, but put it down and don't ever get anything from that person ever again, because there's no way in heck that we're going to be able to have you hit those numbers. I love your ambition, but reality has to set in at some point.
Of course.
So once we've done all of those calculations, then we can determine what is the hourly goal for each of the providers. In an ideal world, if you have multiple doctors working in a practice together and they're all doing about the same kind of dentistry, it's easiest to have them have the same hourly goal.
Okay.
If you have hygienists working in your practice, they should all have the same hourly goal. The only difference is if you have a hygienist who's maybe working with assisted hygiene on a day or two, because she'll be able to produce more. But for your bread and butter general dental practice, it's ideal if you can have the doctors at the same hourly goal and the hygienists at the same hourly goal. It makes it a lot easier for your administrative team to then calculate your daily, monthly, quarterly, and annual goals based off of what's the hourly goal times the number of hours that the provider is in the practice on each individual day. And setting an hourly goal first rather than a daily goal is much more reasonable in today's day and age, because most of the offices that I know have hygienists that are working part-time, and sometimes the doctors are as well. You may have a doctor that works 2.5 days a week and another one that works 1, and then another one that works 3. So that way it makes it much easier to calculate. The important thing is that once we set our SMART goals, right, which are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, then we want to make sure that we continue to monitor them. We don't just set it and forget it. We check in each month to see how they're doing. And at the end of the quarter, if they have come within 95% of the goal, it's the right goal. That's a physiological fact that changes in your brain when you're within 95% of hitting a goal that you've set. It's the right goal. It keeps you motivated. And we want to set a number that makes us all want to do just a little bit more. Because if you're blowing your goal out, it's not the right goal. It's too low. That's just what you're doing already. And if you're, 80% of hitting goal, then it's probably too high, or there are things that need to change in the practice. So once we get the numbers, then we have to figure out, now, how do we make this happen? And so some of the things that I have my offices work on then is, what's your new patient goal? You can't set lofty production goals if you have 10 new patients coming in per month, unless you're a specialty practice and each patient is worth, 5 figures. For a general practice, you're going to need on average 25 to 50 new patients per month per full-time doctor to be able to see significant growth, because you also have to consider the fact that whether or not you're calculating it, you are losing patients out the back door. So you need new patients. That is the lifeblood of the practice. So set your new patient goal as well to fall within those parameters. As I said, 25 to 50 is about the benchmark of new patients per full-time doctor per month. After that, start to look at, how is your schedule done? If you don't have ideal scheduling, block scheduling already in place, it's going to be very challenging for you to come close to hitting your daily goal on a regular basis. So if you haven't done that yet, you need to implement that system. See what services you want to add. Are there discretionary services that are not influenced by insurance participation that can significantly boost your profitability, because you're definitely not taking any write-offs on that? And you're going to need to make sure you also build a strategic marketing campaign if you do want to start adding some discretionary services, and not just rely on people finding you because you're listed on their insurance website.
Yeah.
Maximize the use of technology. If you're not already using a CRM, a client relationship management software like Weave or Curve, or there's a bunch of them out there to help automate patient confirmations, allowing patients to schedule online, doing any sort of follow-ups with them, working on your newsletter, your blog, so that you're constantly staying in front of people, now is the time to implement that. In addition, utilizing AI for diagnostics and treatment planning can save a lot of time for the doctor in the chair. And it also ends up being a very objective way for patients to agree with what your recommendations are. The other thing you want to think about as far as technology and equipment is, what other equipment do you want to incorporate into your practice that either fits the model that you have now or will support the model you want to build? So don't just buy something because it's the newest, shiniest thing and 3 of your friends have it. If you have a practice that is a very low volume practice, it doesn't make sense for you to invest in a CAD/CAM machine with a 3D printer, because what you're going to be paying for it monthly is probably not going to be recouped in a significant ROI. However, if you can calculate that, hey, on average, each doctor does 25 to 30 crowns per month, and our lab bill is this, and in addition to the fact we now have to spend 2 chair times to have that patient come in, get prepped and temped, and then come back. If you are seeing 25 to 30 crowns per month, then investing in a CAD/CAM is a very viable possibility for your practice, but you still have to sit down and run your numbers to make sure that it makes sense. And then outsource anything, as I said, those menial tasks. The ones that are particularly helpful are insurance verification and processing. Any of you that has an insurance coordinator in your practice, I think that's wonderful. They will never know as much as what those companies know, because A, they have a whole team of experts that are handling your insurance for you. That is all that they do as well. So they tend to have fewer claims rejected because they ensure that everything is correct before it goes out. And if you don't know what your cash flow is like because you are in network and accepting assignment of benefits from the insurance companies, I can tell you that your cash flow is probably about 50% lower on a month-to-month basis than a fee-for-service practice, because most of those companies are taking 30 to 60 days to pay you.
Yeah.
So, unless you have like a really good nest egg and you can float yourself that half of your production month to month is not going to be coming in for at least 1 to 2 months, and then possibly not even getting it all because of rejected claims or denied claims or delayed claims. So, have somebody else take care of it and do all the hard work for you. Because the other thing is, if you have a relationship based practice, the last thing I want my admin person is being on the phone on hold and then finally dealing with some moron who works at the insurance company telling me why you denied the claim for an hour, hanging up the phone and then greeting a new patient.
Mhm.
Because I don't care how great of an actress you are and how quickly you can shift. It is not the mindset that you want your team to be in when they are face forward with your patients. So take away those tasks. Another big one is marketing. Obviously, have someone handling your social media, your blog, your newsletters, any of your website updates, an in office membership plan so that you have something in place for those patients who don't have insurance or who have really lousy insurance and would rather get off of it and use your in office membership plan. There are companies that will manage that entire thing for you. They charge a nominal fee and they have a beautiful platform so it looks very professional and the patients can constantly check on their own without having to call you and bug you about, hey, how much did I spend so far this year, and when did I have my last hygiene visit? I don't know when I can get my next one scheduled. It improves the branding of your practice as being cutting edge. Make sure that you also allow patients to be able to schedule online and then any sort of offsite HR support as well. Because your office manager, yes, they will handle the actual initial conversations, but again, they are not an HR expert. So you need to make sure that you have your brain trust outside. Now, when I talk to doctors about these additional support companies, I get it. The first thing they ask is, oh my gosh, well, how much more is that going to cost me? And I say, yes, I understand that. Yes, we do include that in your team costs when we're figuring out your overhead percentages because they are part of your team. And here's the thing that you need to consider. Those are all 1099s or you're paying them a flat vendor fee. So rather than hiring a person to be in your office, not doing any of those jobs that I talked about, as well as the companies that specialize in it, you are only paying them once. You are not paying them benefits. You are not paying payroll taxes on them. You don't have to worry about them calling in sick. You don't have to worry about onboarding them. You don't have to worry about replacing them. You don't have to worry about them gossiping with one other person on the team. And so it is the best investment to be utilizing those specialty companies to help your office run more efficiently. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily scale down your team, but my experience has been that a lot of times teams are a bit bloated because they do have people that are kind of handling this, but just not really doing it as well as it could be done. And so you may make the decision that, hey, I can actually scale down my team a bit. And if it's the right reason to do it, that's usually a benefit for everybody because we all know that team cost is the highest percentage on our P&L. That is the biggest chunk of our overhead is compensating our team for all of those things that I mentioned.
Oh, that was a load of information. Appreciate that. I'm wondering with the production, how is it that you're finding ways to, like, I mean, if a client is not using a piece of technology, I
Mm-hmm.
would consider that in my, in my line of work, a wealth transfer. If it's sitting there not making money, then you need to get rid of it and save the dollars that you're spending on it. I mean, how do you go in there and determine that? Is that something that you have to go, you have a list, a litany list of things to ask your clients, or I mean, how do you nail that down? I will carve that
So
down too.
ask me that a different way, Ward. I don't know what you're asking me exactly.
Sure, absolutely. If a client is using or think they're using a piece of equipment, if a piece of
Mhm.
equipment is there, or they have a subscription for a tool, and they're not really using it to to the point where they're really getting the ROI.
Mhm.
How are you? how are you determining that? Which matrix, or are you creating a matrix metrics to determine whether or not these people or your clients are losing money because they're not really using the tool?
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's use as an example like a CAD CAM system. Okay, they're pretty expensive. They're over $100,000 for the scanner, the mill, and the oven as well, if you have that too.
Mhm.
And when the doctor goes to do the initial, lunch and learn on it, and they let them play around with it. The reps always talk about like, oh, doctor, this is going to be great because it's only going to cost you, I'll just try to use round numbers. Let's say it's 1,500 a month, so that's one crown. That's all you have to do is one more crown and you've paid for it. And it's, true in theory. However, what they don't take into account is how long does it normally take the doctor to do the crown from start to finish? How much of that time is actually utilized by the doctor rather than the assistant? And if the doctor is the one that's in the room doing it the whole entire time, I can tell you from personal experience, when they go through the breakdown of, oh, well, now you can do, 5 crowns in 2 hours instead of 1 crown in 2 hours or 2 crowns in 2 hours. And so, yeah, you're going to be able to maximize that. Well, that is true if you have a doctor that is able to work out of multiple rooms with multiple assistants who are trained to do all of the stuff that they can do. And part of the reason why sometimes those systems don't work well is because the doctor doesn't want to let go of doing any of those parts, even when the assistant can legally do it. And so the roadblock often is that the doctor does not have the team as well trained as possible to utilize the machinery. So what I would be looking at is, okay, what's your pipeline for crowns? How many do you have outstanding that haven't been scheduled yet? What has your average been over the last 2 years of crowns per month? So we can figure out whether or not this makes sense for you. And then determining, okay, once we back out what the lab fee is, okay, that's important, but don't forget you're going to spend more on materials now because you're going to need to be buying all the materials for the in-office portion. So that, depending upon what kind of a lab you were using before, is kind of almost a wash. And yes, you have the patient in the chair once rather than twice, which can be a big, big savings in the sense that you don't have to, you're now using anesthetic once rather than for 2 different visits. You're turning over the room once rather than 2 times. And in addition to the hard costs associated with hourly overhead, you have to think about all of the additional time that's wasted by your assistant processing instruments for 2 visits versus 1. And what does that do for wear and tear, et cetera? So there are a lot of other things that we look at besides just, well, it only costs me this much per month. And if I do just one more crown, it'll cover it. Well, yeah, it very well might. But if you don't have the space to work out of, like if you're a doctor using a CAD CAM, to really make it work well, I think you need to be able to work out of 3 rooms so that you can have one room, like 2 rooms work side by side where you're sort of zigzagging your patients to be able to do your high production procedures. And then maybe your 3rd room to do your, sand and water, no charge, quick checks, et cetera. So if you don't have that, and now you have one room tied up for 2 hours without the ability to do anything more in the next room because you don't have the space, then it might not make sense. But, it's something that you have to see what the doctor is getting reimbursed for as well, because when doctors are looking at their production, if they are in network with insurance companies, a lot of them don't realize exactly how much it's costing them to see any of those patients. And when I'm talking to doctors about insurance participation and possibly breaking it, I have a specific course on just that. And I break down the math for them. And what they find is that their profit for doing a crown may be like a couple of $100. So they look at like, oh, it's great, we charge 1,500. Okay, you charge 1,500, but then it has to get downgraded to like 1,100, and then you may be capturing all of that in your revenue. But here's the bigger question: what's your hourly overhead? Do you even know? Because most doctors don't. And so when we talk about the time value of money, if doctors don't know how much it costs them to have the office open, have the team paid, pay the vendors, cover all of their overhead costs, basically everything gets paid except for the doctor, the owner doctor, and their loans. And they don't have any additional cash to be able to put away for reserves, then sometimes what they're making on one of those patients is less than what their hourly overhead is, which means, translation, you're losing money.
That is a very good way, an excellent way to describe the lost, what I would call a wealth transfer. I mean, I
Hmm.
don't, but yeah, definitely the way you set this up, the way you allow, uh, dentists the opportunity to see it before they actually get there is so important. So I
Hmm.
was wondering, so we talked about a little bit about the true cost. Um, talk about that for a second.
So, are we talking about the true cost of a broken appointment
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes,
or
yes,
open time?
yes.
Um,
Because
okay,
we
so
were talking about time earlier. So
yeah,
yeah,
so
go ahead.
so we know that okay, it's cold and flu season. So every office I talk to, whether they're a client or a colleague or a friend, everyone's dealing with last minute cancellations. People seem to be getting sicker than ever before for whatever reason.
Mhm.
So that is becoming a bigger and bigger challenge for a lot of offices. And what I am finding is that when you have a team who views a broken appointment as this needs to be fixed immediately, they may have the same number of last minute cancellations, but at the end of the month, when we're counting up their actual open time, it can be in the single digits of hours, which is what we wanted at. You don't want more than 10% open time in the hygienist or the doctor's schedule.
Okay.
When it starts to creep above that is when it really starts getting concerning because here's what happens. Let's say you have two hygienists working and they work every day, and each hygienist has one patient who either no shows, cancels, or does a late broken appointment with them, and they can't get that space filled, or they don't work hard enough to get that space filled. The attitude can often be, it's not that big of a deal. It was only a cleaning. And it makes my head explode when I hear that phrase because it is never only a cleaning. Because what you need to calculate is this: you have lost production on the hygienist schedule. So, at a minimum, you've lost the cost of the prophy and the cost of the periodic exam. Let's say, just to be lowballing it, that's about $200 between the prophy and the exam. So the office manager or the admin team may look at it and go, well, it's only $200. Look, we're doing, X number of thousands per day. That's not that big of a deal. Okay, that's 200 times two that one day. If each hygienist had one appointment that wasn't initially filled or fell off and wasn't scrambled to get filled, they ended up with an open hour per day. That's $400 a day if you work 4 days a week. That's what? $1,600 a week. That's nothing to sneeze at, but that's only the tip of the iceberg because what the team fails to understand is that the doctor is paying whether or not there's a patient in the chair. I don't know any team out there, and I don't fault them for this, that says, oh, you know what, doc, we have an opening. So you know what? You don't have to pay me for this hour. We don't have a patient in the chair, so you don't have to pay me for this hour.
Mhm.
You don't have AT&T calling you up and saying, hey, we understood that you had an opening. So you know what? We're not going to charge you for that 1 hour of service. You don't have your landlord calling you up and saying, hey, I know that you had an opening. So I'm going to amortize your rent to account for that. No, the bills need to be paid whether there's a patient in the chair or not. So what you need to calculate is what is your hourly overhead? What does it cost you on an hourly basis to have everybody there, the lights on, the doors open, ready to take care of people? Because that is the number that every single person who's answering the phone has to have in the front of her mind when a patient is calling to try to cancel an appointment at the last minute. because it is not $200. It is $200 that fell off of production. In addition to the fact that if a patient doesn't come in for hygiene, and I just use that as an example because that tends to be the area where the most openings happen. If a patient doesn't come in for her hygiene exam, not only does the office not get production for that day, the doctor has lost the opportunity to do any diagnosis that would turn into future dental treatment. And so, not to be mercenary about it, the patient is also at risk now because the patient has missed her opportunity to see the doctor, to have her periodontal condition evaluated, to have all of her teeth evaluated, her TMJ, an oral cancer screening, and discuss any other concerns that may be going on that she's just not aware of because she doesn't have symptoms yet. So, from a non-financial perspective, it's not a good idea to let a hygiene appointment fall off of the books. But now you add in, oh, you know what? Also, the doctor, on average, for every dollar that's generated in hygiene, in an average practice, that roughly translates into $2 in the doctor's chair at some point. So it wasn't a $200 appointment. It was kind of a $600 appointment. And that's at a minimum because it also depends on what's your doctor's hourly production on a regular basis, because that's closer to what didn't get diagnosed. And it costs the doctor, most offices, their hourly overhead is probably running somewhere between $400 and $800 an hour, depending upon the size of their facility and what their costs are. So that one cleaning appointment cost the doctor over $1,000, not $200. That's 10 times more having an opening in your hygiene schedule. So that's the number that I want all admin people to have in the back of their head when someone's calling with, if someone's hacking a lung up on the phone, I believe them that they're sick. But let's face it, there are people that use it as an excuse or just come up with some lame excuse, or worse yet, don't even call us to tell us that. And that's the number that should be glaring every time someone's trying to break an appointment. Because if that continues, it can start to significantly impact the productivity and the profitability and the cash flow of the practice. And you know what? At some point, it might trickle down to the point where the doctor has to make a hard decision about how many team members that person needs.
Oh, yeah.
So from a selfish perspective, it is in the team's best interest to ensure that those patients stay on the schedule.
Yeah, that's about, almost a little under $50,000. And if you get anywhere close to that average, you said you want no more than 10. So let's deal with 10. You test, I don't know, how many, $500,000. $500,000, who wants to lose that? On a yearly basis? That's crazy. That's insane. I can't imagine how much money you'll have at a 5% compound growth instrument over 10 years on that $500,000. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. It severely impacts the thing I see happen a lot with doctors is that they are only looking at their production numbers, their production and their collection numbers. They are not looking at all on what their cash flow is like. They are not looking at all on their profitability. And so those are the doctors that get stressed and confused at the end of each month, because they look at their numbers and they go, I don't understand this. I'm producing, let's say 100,000 a month, just me, not the office as a whole. And my hygienists are doing 20,000 a month. And, we're also doing some other adjunctive things. So we're producing $160,000 to $200,000 a month. Why am I still struggling to pay my bills? Well, because that doesn't mean jack. It only matters what's coming in and how fast it's coming in and where it's going out. And so the doctors that at the least may run their profit and loss statement and look at it and go, well, I have all this extra money, but I paid myself, I paid my loans, and I don't have that much left over. What the heck is going on? Because they need to understand that profitability does not equal productivity. And it doesn't at all equal their cash flow. And so the doctors that are constantly struggling because of open time that isn't, ravenously filled, because of teams not working as efficiently as possible, not having systems in place, not ensuring that everyone is as cross-trained as possible, and that everyone is doing the maximum that she can do within the legal limit of the law for her position, they are the ones that have to work until they're 65. And they're just hoping there's a golden, egg at the end when they sell their practice. And that is a crappy way to live. You spent a ton of time, money, and effort going through dental school, building your business. You deserve to have a very abundant life. There's nothing wrong with that, because when you are abundant, you have the ability to share it with your team. You have the ability to gift it to patients in need. You have the ability to use it for charitable things outside of the practice if you want. You have the ability to spend quality time with your family on the things that you all love, whether it's experiences or items, it doesn't matter. But it allows you also to make better choices, because when you have better cash flow, when you're more profitable, you are in a less stressed state all the time, and you can make better choices. I don't know anyone who makes a wise decision when they are living with anxiety.
Oh, well said. Well said. Well said. So, given this topic or these couple ideas that we've been talking about, are there any other areas that we missed that you?
Related to these two, let me check my
Yeah.
notes, but I don't think so. No, I mean, I guess, one of the things I want to close with is a couple of things. One is when appointments fall off the book, and we've already talked about, the cost of that.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
only because of external things that are happening, like it's cold and flu season. A lot of times why patients either don't show or blow you off last minute or just blow you off is because we have not done a good enough job of building the value of that patient coming back. And it starts in the back, in the clinical area. It starts with the doctor when he or she is presenting the treatment to the patient, asking great questions of the patient to ensure that the patient's on the same page, and that we are then presenting our treatment recommendation to the patient in the way that that patient wants to gather the information, because we all hear and learn information differently. And also speaking to whatever that patient values the most about her dental care and her dental health.
See.
And there are different things that every person values. And if you present your treatment in the same way every single time, and all you do is when you get done, you say, okay, so Ward, did I explain that well? Yep. Okay, great. I'll see you soon. You did not close that case.
No.
Now you left it up to your team to close your case. And that doesn't happen very well on a regular basis. And so unless you have systems in place to ensure that the doctor gets a commitment from the patient before she leaves the room, that she hands off the information to her assistant or hygienist, whoever's in the room with her, that gets handed off to the financial coordinator first, because you need to make sure the patient is comfortable with the finances before you schedule them. And then she hands it to the scheduling coordinator so nothing is missed, and the patient has heard multiple times what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and the patient has committed to this. Guess what happens in practices that are routine with that system? They have fewer cancellations on average because the patient has bought in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Scott Adams, who very recently passed, he had a line, and I'm probably going to mash his sentence up a little bit, but what he said was goals, and I know this is kind of ironic because we were just talking about this, but goals are for losers, systems are for winners, or winners have systems, losers have goals. The purpose of that is, it's kind of like the law of attraction, where you can focus on something that you want, but you still have to do the work. So once you set your goals, what you need to do is make sure your systems are in place to support you hitting those goals. And if they aren't, then that's your first point of business. Get your systems established, ensure that everyone is very well trained, and then make sure that you're doing constant evaluation of how are we doing? Are we close to where we want to be? And if not, why not?
Yes.
And ensure that you're having regular meetings with your team. A lot of offices have gotten away from doing like a morning huddle. And that just boggles my mind. I would not want my doctor coming in without knowing what she was expecting to do on me that day. Okay. It puts everyone in the right frame of mind. It gets you all on the same page. You get to triage how the day is going to look. If there are any potential roadblocks, how you're going to work through it. So you're not scrambling to deal with it in the moment. You've already planned ahead. And I used to have an end of day meeting, and that was a great way to wrap up the day with a bow, acknowledge what had gone really well, who had done things amazingly, and also triage like what didn't work so well. And so how can we avoid that from happening in the future? But it was a great way to end your day. It was a great bookend for everyone to leave feeling like we left on the same page as well. And when they left the office, they really left the office so they could go do their other things with their personal life. Whereas a lot of offices, people just they get done and they just walk out the door.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're lingering things. And so, all of those things are important to be able to set the tone for your day and close your day. And I recommend that you have at a minimum monthly team meetings with the whole entire team. Even if not everybody works full time with Zoom, you can do everything remotely now. So if you've got part-time team members, there's no reason why they can't, dial in. They don't even have to be on camera necessarily, but you need to have everybody on the same page on a regular basis, because that's how you start to move the needle. It's the small changes that happen, but you have to have a concerted effort and a very clear vision of where you're going and why.
Yeah, I like that end of the day close, that exit. I mean, having that meeting at the end of the day is
Mm-hmm.
just as important as the beginning of the day, because it's kind of leading to the next day, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for coming in and speaking to us today. As usual, uh, we got the information and more that we had actually expected. I mean, you just always outdo yourself. I don't know what you're going to do next time. So, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next quarter for sure, right?
Absolutely, Ward. Thank you so much for having me.
The Wealthy Dentist podcast is built on connections, opportunities, and meaningful conversations that help jumpstart careers and boost the ROI on your business. Is there a topic you're passionate about, or someone in the dental community who should share their story with us? We want to hear from you. Email your suggestions to the Wealthy Dentist Podcast at gmail.com, and let's create content that informs, inspires, and uplifts the dental world. Your ideas could spark our next big conversation. Let's make it happen. I'm Ward Powell, your host at the Wealthy Dentist Podcast, thanking you for being a part of our journey.